Stop, please. Hold there. It's not heavy enough. Thank you. Oh. Sorry, maybe you want to carry it.
I don't see them. No, we are not there. We are not there. I don't know if.
Did you check them in Alibi's office?
No, I went directly to the restaurant to see. But maybe, can you go to see?
Alibi, because
Yes.
both of them did not come for lunch.
Okay.
You remember when they didn't come for lunch?
There was
They
some
said they
meeting.
were to have lunch with so let them.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are here to the panel session 7 and 9. For this panel session, we will have 4 presentations for the first part. And after the coffee break, we will have 3 other presentations. For the first presentation, the paper will be presented by Oyawole Fumi Niyi. Yes, and the comment will be done by Professor Silvanus. You have 15 minutes at most.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oyawole Fumi Niyi, and on behalf of my co-authors, I'll be presenting this paper, What Drives the Adoption of Climate-Smart Agricultural Practices, Evidence from Maize Farmers in Northern Nigeria. What's the motivation for this study? Now, the global climate is changing, as we have had presentations since morning, and its most direct impact will be on agricultural systems, especially smallholder farmers. Coupled with the fact that in Africa, about 85% of the population depend on rain-fed agriculture and base their livelihood on agriculture mainly. Then in sub-Saharan Africa also, about 96% of the total cropland is based on rain-fed systems. This implies that agricultural production and farmers' livelihood are highly exposed to changes and fluctuations in climatic conditions. Okay, interestingly, unsustainable agricultural practices contribute significantly to climate change, which in turn strongly affects agriculture. This implies that farmers are both, agriculture is both a driver of climate change and also happens to be one of the sectors that suffers mostly from climate change. So there is a need to get more sustainable systems to agriculture that can improve productivity and reverse environmental degradation. This led to the production of, development now and promotion of climate-smart agriculture by the Food and Agriculture Organization. Climate-smart agricultural practices are those that, 1, increase agricultural productivity and income, 2, build resilience and capacity of agricultural and food systems to adapt to climate change, and 3, reduce or remove greenhouse gases while enhancing national food security. Okay. Despite the potential of these practices, the adoption of these practices remain very low, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So this study is investigating the factors that drive the adoption of climate-smart practices among smallholder maize farmers. We believe that identifying these factors can help us to design appropriate systems by which it can be promoted. Okay. So I'll be using data collected by a project. It's a project sponsored by ECOWAS Regional Agency for Food and Agriculture. And we used 5 states in northern Nigeria. You can see those highlighted there. Kebbi State, Niger, Kaduna, Nasarawa, and Taraba. Okay, so 238 maize producing households were actually surveyed, and this analysis will be done at the plot level. So we have 410 maize plots that were considered for the analysis. For the method of data analysis, I'll be using multivariate probability model. This is because we believe that farmers do not make adoption decisions, in a vacuum. They don't make it separately. For example, we don't expect farmers to adopt just one practice to combat climate-smart agriculture. I believe that these practices could influence each other. Some are substitutes, some are complements. So modeling them using a univariate probability or logit model will give us an inconsistent estimate and biased estimate. So a multivariate probability model helps us to model this situation accurately, in the sense that it helps us to it allows the error terms of the binary probability models to be correlated, so that we can check whether they influence each other or not. That gives us more accurate results. Now, we believe that the farmer will only adopt a practice if he believes that the utility he intended, or his expected utility is greater than the utility he currently uses and gets from the traditional system. So it is only if it is greater than 0, then he will adopt that particular practice. Now, so the practice I'll be focusing on for this study are green manure, agroforestry, use of organic manure, zero minimum tillage, crop rotation, and refuge retention, as opposed to bush burning. The results are interesting. Some of the explanatory variables are here. The key ones, we see that a very low percentage of the maize farmers are women, just 10% of them. Then we see that most of them are middle-aged, around 43, 44 years old, with household size. Their farm size is about 3 hectares on the average. And if you look at the last two, land ownership status, about 67 of them claim to own the land with the farm, while plot travel distance from home. The number of minutes used in trekking to the plot is about 51 minutes. That's almost an hour. And we believe has implications on adoption. Now, the 6 practices that we considered, these are the adoption figures. You could see that it confirms earlier literature that is actually low. You see green manure, very low, that's 18%. The one that was most adopted was organic manure, and it's not even up to half, just 45% of them adopt organic manure. So the question is, what actually drives the adoption of these things? Now, the first thing you see, of course, the multivariate probability model helps us to check these factors independently at the same time. So you see that a particular variable could have different influence on different practices. As you see now, I'll bring out the salient points. As you see, off-farm participation, off-farm work participation is significant for 2 variables. Group membership is also significant. We have the sex of the plot manager is also a significant variable. But you see this is the continuation of that same table. But I'll bring out the salient points. What are the summaries? Number 1, farmers who generate off-farm income are significantly more likely to adopt agroforestry and green manure. This is a very significant result. This shows us that farmers who have another source of income are more likely to be less risk averse and willing to try out other technologies. Their whole livelihood is not really based on that particular production. Secondly, we see landowners are more likely to adopt agroforestry and zero minimum tillage. This is also interesting. Of course, we know agroforestry tends to is a permanent practice, so to speak. Once you plant a tree on a land, then of course you must own the land, because otherwise the landlord could say perhaps you want to steal his land away from him. So we see that land ownership is actually very important, and if we want to push for the adoption of agroforestry, then it also means that we have to review the land tenure arrangements that are currently existing in sub-Saharan Africa, where we have communal land ownership, we have all sorts of land ownership systems. Okay. Again, we see that male farmers are more likely to adopt crop rotation and refuge retention relative to their female counterparts. Of course, literature by so many authors, Quinsum being 2010 thereabout, tell us that female farmers have less access to some of these productive resources, especially land. And crop rotation almost implies that you have more than 1 plot of land so that you can rotate the food crops your family needs and then produce cash crops for sale. So you see that male farmers, who literature says have more access to land, are more likely to adopt crop rotation relative to female. So this also has implications if we want to drive climate smart agricultural practice adoption. Group membership positively influences the adoption of green manure and organic manure. The importance of social capital has also been established in literature, that when farmers come together, they are more likely to educate each other, train each other, and then influence each other towards adopting these practices. So we believe that that's also important. And this also shows us that the likelihood of adopting organic and green manure reduced as walking distance to the maize plot increased. This implies that if government, or let me say, if we as development practitioners are interested in actually promoting this practice, we see that walking distance is a barrier, especially for practices that involve farmers carrying bulky inputs to go and use. So as the plot gets farther away from their home, the less likely they are to actually adopt that practice. So this tells us that there are extenuating circumstances that would actually drive whether farmers adopt something or they don't adopt, despite the benefit. So what are the policy implications, which I think I have said most of it there. 1, we conclude that factors that influence adoption of climate smart practices are not unanimous and vary significantly with the practice. That is, if we want to push or drive this, the adoption of these practices, then we need to really sit down and check which practice do we want to drive. One, that is better or for the development context of that particular location. Then we need to know which factors drive it. There's no one size fits all policy that we could make that could drive all these practices at the same time. Secondly, we say based on this result, it is recommended that farmers be encouraged to join groups or cooperatives as it improves and provides an avenue for awareness, informal education, and technical assistance in applying a new agricultural practice. Lastly, as we see, walking distance is a major factor. So we feel that if all these service roads or rural routes could be improved, or let me say their condition is bettered, then perhaps encouraged to actually adopt this practice. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. You are in the time. So, Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, my young man. I think the paper, the way I say it, is apt and relevant to today's program. But the problem I have, why do you title a paper by asking a question? And I think that there is need for you to recapture it, recapture that topic. I had, as a way forward, I talked about determinants, okay? Determinants of adoption of CSA. You see, you looked at the factors that determine CSA. So why are you asking the question when you can provide the answer? So that's why my suggestion seems to be much apt. However, your introduction was quite apt, and you justified the work, and you went ahead and gave relevant literature on climate smart practices. And so I think that you looked at the issues of deforestation as part of the challenges of GHG, greenhouse effect, and you looked at the other practices. In fact, the 6 practices which we have already discussed: green manure, agroforestry, organic manure, refuse retention, crops, etc. And selected socioeconomic characteristics were discussed. Age, female plot and farm size, low land, land ownership, plot trekking distance, and all that. You had discussed them. There were those factors actually are inhibiting factors if you looked at it carefully, because with the kind of things we do in Africa, people trek to work, and most of the farms, except in large urban centers, are distant farms. So if you look at the impact of distant farms on a very bad road, you would be discouraged from adopting any practice that is going to make you carry more burden. So in that case, the results there were quite apt. The problem I had is one of the results that had an average mean of 45% and had a standard deviation of 50. You know, I was a little bit bothered. I said, what does that mean? You know, so I think you should look at those that result again and see where it fits. You have one small challenge. Are you the one that collected that data, or somebody collected the data? The way it seems, you have not actually given significant attention to how that. Did they collect the data and left it in a cupboard and now went and pulled it? Or did they do some analysis for which you were now doing to confirm what they have done? What did you do? Is it part of the report? So you collected, they just left the thing in the fire, and you went and picked the result, the data, and started working on it. So if it is so, you see, you have a problem with the data, because it's not your data. You don't know how it was collected. We are just working on it. So there's need to look at it. I give credit to whoever is merits credit. If they did all the work and all you are doing is to confirm the results, I think you should do so. Confirm the results. Say, look, these people have done this, but when I did this, this is what I got. And so it begins to now flow that someone did the job, reached somewhere, and now you now had to complete the job. If you can credit the person that did the job, I think it will be better for us. The analytical technique is okay. It's a discrete motivated model. And so it would answer the questions as you had addressed. And I think they did. The drivers, you had extension agents. I don't know whether the extension agent was the driver or the process itself in which extension delivery was affected. Okay? So you let me know. Well, if an extension agent makes contact, and the number of contacts he makes with the farmer that enables him to, this is, so instead of just saying extension, say extension contact. Okay? Extension contact will definitely make someone to know that, look, it is the number of times this person visited this person that enabled him to get, to adopt a CSA. And I think basically both of the conclusions I saw there were okay, except for the observations I've made. If you could, it would be a worthy paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. And now we'll go to the second presentation. And it will be done by Moussa Diallo. Okay, you have 15 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Moussa Diallo. This is a paper done by myself, Nikez Ama, and William Ajaula. The title of this paper is Factor Influencing the Adoption of Climate Smart Agriculture by Farmers in Ségou region in Mali. Before saying something, I will say that my predecessor also already, especially Professor Van Brom, Professor Akleso, and just the last one who left here. So, however, I have something to add. There is the outline of our presentation. By starting by introduce the situation, you can say that climate change have a global impact. These impacts are severe, especially on agrarian community, especially those farmers who are relying on subsistence agriculture. And then one of the major impact of climate change is on food security, as my predecessor has said yesterday and today morning. But also the impact of climate change is not going to reduce only the production of the food production or food availability, but also to reduce or to destroy the quality of food. Therefore, achieving the global food security will be not easy if something is not done against the impact of climate change. Therefore, farmers must take adaptive measures that will maximize the impact of climate change and lead to higher production, and as well as reduce the negative contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emission. And then one of these important adaptation strategies is climate smart agriculture, saying by Pate, one of the scientists research of climate change, agriculture, and food security. To try to define climate smart agriculture, we can say that is an approach for transforming and reorienting agriculture to support food security and also to mitigate the impact of climate change. Here, it's also an agriculture that sustainably increase productivity, resilience, reduce greenhouse gases, and hence to achieve of national food security and global goals. Considering this significant importance or benefit of CSA, the expectation is that the adoption will be higher among farmers, but unfortunately, this is not the case. Farmers in crop producing household of Mali normally. Therefore, the main question of this study is to analyze the influencing factor of climate smart, of the adoption of climate smart agriculture. Hence, to understand this factor will help the Ministry of Agriculture to design effective policy to enhance climate smart agriculture in the country. And then the study location, this study was carried out in the region of Ségou in Mali, which is the fourth region of Mali. This region is characterized by semi-arid climate and have an average rainfall of 513 millimeters per year. And then the region is one of the main producing region of the country. Therefore, for sustainable food production and reduce poverty among households in the region, it's appropriate that farmers should adopt climate smart agriculture. For the data collection, the study used two-stage sampling procedure in selecting the respondent. The first purpose was to select Ségou region because of this is they are in somewhere in Cizana, the climate change and agriculture and food security. It's a research center which implement some climate smart village in this area. So this is why the study was done there. So, and after that, we simply do a simple random sampling to collect data on 432 farmers. And the data was analyzed using multivariate probit to estimate the effect of specific climate smart agriculture strategies and a Poisson regression to estimate the effect of factor on the count of climate smart strategies. And the model estimate is here. Here are those variables used in the model. Sex is a dummy variable, 1 if the farmer is male, and 0 if not. And adult, the total number of household members with age 18 and above. And from the average number of hour a farmer spends on farm daily, and so on. Here is the descriptive statistic of the study. And those who are adopted and those who are not adopted the climate smart, the technology of climate smart agriculture. For drought resistant, about 29% of farmers have adopted drought resistant, and CA, about 31% adopted this one, and so on. But row renting is the most technology adopted by farmer. Maybe this is close to the traditional use. This is why maybe they use most this technology. About those who are not adopted any one of the technology, among this ESFM is the less adopted. Here is the estimation result from drought resilient to EPM. That's the result of multivariate probit, and the last column is the result of Poisson model. Therefore, by explaining this result or interpreting this result, the Poisson model, the sex is not significant significant, and also household adult is not significant, but the education is significant. Means that there is a potential to use so that which can allow them to to adopt more the technology of climate smart agriculture. And also the experience also is significant, and also farming system also is significant. Means that maybe associate culture can be benefit by using the climate smart technology also. Coming to the multivariate result, which is from the drought resistant to IPM, the sex is negative but significant for IPM. Means that being a male can be negative in adopting this technology, because the use of this technology needs a huge concentration, which can be easily done by male to men. And also row planting is significant and positive for sex. This means that being a man is probably adopting row planting comparing to female. So far, we can also see flood time, which is a variable used in the model. It's a negative and significant in drought resistant, and also, but negative also in ESFF. In concluding this work, the descriptive statistic and the marginal success prediction show that the adoption of row planting is higher than for the oldest technology. And also, the factor that influence the adoption of each CSA vary in terms of magnitude, direction, and significance. For the adoption level, education, land source, experience, farm system, credit access, farm size, and drought had a significant effect on adoption. These clearly indicate that for the promotion of adoption of various climate-smart technology, specific factors must be considered. Although targeting some variable for the adoption of one technology may have a replication effect on the adoption of another technology. And then, considering this low level of adoption and the positive effect of education on adoption intensity, there is a need to improve farmer knowledge on CSA to achieve this intention service by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development should promote the adoption of climate-smart agriculture. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Once again, Professor Silvanus.
Okay. No, it's okay. The title of the paper again, as I said, is well apt, but sometimes we need to garnish papers. So I think that it should be, we should add climate change agricultural technologies, because if you read his work, he was talking about technology. So at least the paper should carry that kind of heading. Factors influencing the adoption of climate change agricultural technologies. Okay, that's CSA technologies. Now, he defined the paper well. He had a good abstract, but I understand his background is not English. So you need a little bit of, you need to get somebody to do some editing if it must be published in English. Otherwise, you know, when you publish, put things that way, you have problems. So data is always many, data to miss one, the critical one that you should not miss. Then on the introduction, he writes quite eloquently on introduction, and it talks about the problems of climate change, talks about the advantages of climate smart agricultural technology, and on that basis, he now decides to do two things. One, to look at the level of adoption of climate smart technology and the factors which influence the adoption of climate change. Those were the major critical objectives of that study. To achieve that objective, the young man picked a location, and after that he did some sampling and used the data, he used the multivariate probit model again to analyze the model. Of course, then we should look at the results. I don't want to worry too much. On the level of adoption, he found that it was low. Smart technologies were low. Only about 22.5% had some kind of adoption, and overall, only 1.4% had adopted the 5. Just about 22.5 adopted, I think, 1 or 2. The rest, 1.4%, had adopted all the 5. That's a fairly small number. We need to work harder. For factors influencing the adoption of climate smart technologies, he found that sex had a positive effect on planting, on row planting. Other effects were there, but the most significant ones were row planting, and I think they said the ISFM. Overall, the young man recommended that we should intensify the studies of climate change smart technologies because of the low level of adoption. We should evolve programs that will help us to interface with the farmers. My remarks then, if you look at that study, you did not define your variables. Age, how did you measure it? Okay, all of them, all of those variables you put there were not defined. In studies like this, you need to define the variables. education. What do you mean by education? Is this years of experience? Did you complete school? It's not. If you look at your study, it's not there. You to get. You know, you're there, but you did not define the variables. Defining them is a different matter. If I say age is what? Is it in days, in years, in months? So you must tell me in years. Adult, what do you mean by an adult? Okay, is an adult so anybody from 15 years? Some countries maybe, I don't know, say from 16, you are an adult. Others say 21. So which one is, who is an adult in your study? Okay? It's okay. If you put years, I didn't see. I saw the table. I didn't see any of those, but if you've done it, fine. Now, I wanted to ask a question. When you do that table of frequency, how many households did you use? Look at the frequency numbers. Is the adoption of one technology preclude you from adopting another? If it does, then we have to look at that this thing. So if you adopt one technology, I cannot adopt the other. If I can adopt 3 technologies, that means the numbers you have in your frequency will be different from the numbers of total observation. So check it again and make sure that you reconcile those frequencies for it to make meaning, so that it will not be confused. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. And now let's go to presentation 3. That will be made by Abdoulaye Koudougou, and the comment will be done by Dr. Corinne Almeida. You have it for 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chair. Good afternoon to all. My name is Abdoulaye Koudougou. I'm from the current batch of WASCAL. I'm presenting you today my paper, which is titled Adoption and Impact of Organic Farming Practice, a case study of organic cotton farming in Burkina Faso. So that's the outline of my presentation. After introduction, I will briefly talk about research methods, and then results and discussion, conclusion, and recommendations. So as introduction, we are saying that the ecological constraints imposed to economic growth today call for new development options like sustainable development. The report of the Club of Rome in 1962 contributed, among other reports, to bring evidence that we are living today in a world with environmental scarcities. So some authors are arguing that realizing sustainable development call for the implementation of policies that are promoting conservation, recycling, the use of renewable resources, and the bioeconomy. Others focusing on the specific case of agriculture are also focusing that the movement related to sustainable development is a challenge and an opportunity for the agricultural sector. Why? Because agriculture is part of the problem and the solution. So according to the Pesticide Action Network, data from 2009, the conventional production system in agriculture released more than 2 million tons of toxin per year in ecosystems. So organic agriculture is more and more presented today as an alternative to the environmental harmful effects of conventional production systems. The organic agricultural movement began first with pioneer farmers and consumers in the 1970s who were already aware of the need to protect ecosystems around farmlands. But today we have 2 main schools of thought in terms of the interpretation of the development of organic agriculture. We have the ecological modernization theory, which is considering organic agriculture as a social innovation, which aim to change the relationship between agriculture and the environment. We have also the treatment of production theory, where people are seeing organic agriculture as a new market for agricultural entrepreneurs to make profit. But skeptics of this farming system are considering organic agriculture to be ideologically driven and inefficient as a farming system. and former US Ministry of Agriculture, Al Butch, in 1972 was demonstrating his pessimism about the development of this farming system by stating that before we go back to organic agriculture in this country, somebody must decide which 50 million Americans were going to let starve or go hungry. So there is no evidence today about the potential of organic farming practice to provide nutrients, to ensure pest and weed control, and also to provide sustainable livelihoods to farmers. That's the reason for this skepticism. However, there are also some activists who are in favor of the development of organic agriculture. And the Third African Organic Agriculture Conference, which held in Lagos in 2015, came out with the conclusion that organic agriculture have a real role to play in providing sustainable livelihoods to small-scale farmers in developing countries. Now we now come to the cotton sector in Burkina Faso, which is a perfect illustration of the controversy between the need to increase productivity and also the need to protect ecosystems around farmlands. Cotton production in Burkina Faso, conventional cotton production represents less than 5% of farmlands, but consume more than 90% of pesticide that is used in agricultural production in Burkina Faso. So the government, given this decreasing of the efficiency of the green revolution technologies, I want to talk here about synthetic pesticide and agricultural chemicals, given the decreasing efficiency of this green revolution technology to protect pest and weed in agricultural production, especially in the cotton sector in Burkina Faso. The government have think about other alternatives, and in doing so, the first alternative was genetically modified cotton, which have been implemented in Burkina Faso in 2008 after several years of field trials. But genetically modified cotton was abandoned in 2016 because farmers were complaining of the low quality of the cotton fiber resulting from genetically modified cotton. So the other alternative was the organic cotton production, which launched in Burkina Faso in 2004 with the technical assistance of an international Swiss organization. And since the launch of organic cotton production in Burkina Faso, the number of cotton producers joining this program has not stopped increasing. So testifying to the interest that farmers are giving to this cotton production technology. According to some authors, giving the price floor and the fat rate and organic premium, organic farmers are benefiting from higher price compared to conventional cotton, to conventional producers. But it is not evident that this higher price lead also to increase production volumes and also higher incomes to organic farmers. There are some empirical evidence which found that organic farmers will receive higher incomes than the conventional counterfactuals. A study of the Center of Development and Environment that has been conducted in Burkina Faso have compared 53 organic cotton farmers and 48 conventional cotton farmers and came to the conclusion that organic cotton farming improves farmers' mental health by freeing them of credit constraints with cotton companies. Studies have also investigated the factors influencing farmers' decision to grow organic farming. So in the case of Burkina Faso, there are two main studies made in 2018 and Coulter in 2016 made and Coulter in 2011, who found that the institutional organization of the cotton sector is the primary constraint to the expansion of the organic cotton farming in Burkina Faso. But what we found, like a common limit to these studies, is the use of methods that do not allow control for potential endogeneity due to observables and unobservable factors, and also to capture causal effect. So from the evidence we review above, the questions that come in our mind are, what factors make cotton producers more likely to join the organic and fair trade cotton production? And is organic and fair trade cotton production affecting cotton growers' outcomes? So that's the objectives, that the hypothesis we wanted to test. And coming to the research method, we build this work on adopting a random utility model, and we model the adoption decision under the assumption that farmers choose between organic and conventional cotton farming. So we assume that farmers are risk neutral and account for the expected utility derived from the technology, from the adoption of organic farming. And this adoption decision is captured as a binary choice based on the maximization of a utility function. We have here D1, expected utility from organic farming practice, D2 from conventional farming practice, and we have the difference in utility. And the decision is based on this difference. If this difference is positive farmer will self-select in organic cotton farming than conventional cotton farming. That's the probability of adoption. And the relationship between the adoption decision and the outcome variable. We have here two outcome variables. That's the cotton revenue. How first outcome variable is the cotton revenue. And the second outcome variable is the revenue, the level of production of non-cotton crops. That's to take into account this finding of Meadow and Coulter, who find that the institutional organization is a primary concern of organic cotton farming in Burkina Faso. So the relationship between how outcome variables and the decision-making process is like y a function of x. X is a set of covariates that are likely to affect the outcome variables, and D is the decision-making process. So we are saying that estimating the impact of organic cotton farming on farm households, return on cotton production, and also on farm households cotton production value, non-cotton production value, by simply comparing the outcome variables of both groups of organic cotton farmers and conventional cotton farmers, may present a number of selection bias that have to be controlled for. So to take into account this limit, we adopt an androgenous switching regression model. That's the specification of a model. Now, so coming to the data, we base our study from a survey data that we conducted in the central eastern region of Burkina Faso, which is the biggest organic cotton production zone in terms of the number of producers. We gathered data from 80 organic cotton producers and 180 conventional cotton producers. Now, coming to the results and discussion, that's the result of our ESI model, and we compare the selection equation with a simple probit model. So the whole test, we don't have this here, but the whole test confirm the joint significance of the error correlation coefficients, so, and accordingly the ESI model specification. So the results of our study revealed that factors like experience in cotton farming in general, education, the household size, the gender of the head of household, and the knowledge provided to cotton farmers through radio emission are more likely to push farmers to conventional cotton farming practice. And we found that the age of the head of household is more likely to push farmers to organic cotton farming practice. Coming to the average treatment effect, we found that there is evidence that producing organic cotton farming increases farmer cotton return on cotton production. As we take here, the average treatment on the treated is what you see. That means to say that farmer, comparing to the situation where they were growing conventional cotton farming, organic cotton farmers are gaining more on return on cotton production by conducting organic cotton production. But when we come to the level of non-cotton crops production, if that it's true they are gaining more revenue by producing organic cotton, but they are losing in terms of producing non-cotton crops. And this result is comparable to the results of Medal and Coulter, who find that the institutional organization of the cotton sector is not encouraging farmers to go through organic cotton farming practice. Why? Because those who are producing conventional cotton also benefit from subsidies from cotton companies to produce cereals. But those producing organic cotton don't have this favor. So as conclusion, we are saying that while organic cotton farming has great potential to both significantly impact cotton farmers' livelihoods and preserve ecosystem around farmlands, its rate of adoption continues to be very low. And this low adoption of organic cotton farming is mainly due to low yields and indicate that the adoption of organic technology tends to be a profit-oriented process as predicted by the treatment of production theory, rather than a simple social innovation that aims to change the relationship between agriculture and the environment as predicted by the ecological modernization theory. So as policy measure to develop organic cotton farming, we are saying that we need to convince government structures and cotton companies of their interest in investing in organic cotton production. We also need to develop support for organic cotton production in terms of research and direct support to farmers during conversion period. Also need to provide more training to better their skills in organic cotton production techniques. We need to improve the organization and management of the organic cotton sector, and also to promote related crops production in organic cotton production. So that's the end of my speech. I thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ameda. Very floor.
So good morning, good afternoon, and my congrats for Mr. Abdoulaye Kudungu. For your presentation and for the paper that I received from you is clear that you went deep in to understand the context, to understand the methodology, and so you show here a huge amount of work that was done. So my congrats for this. But of course, it's important to show your work, how deep you go in this, but it's important as well to use a little bit better the time, so maybe make a better choice when. So it was important to your presentation to show how huge was your work, but would be important as well to have better time management in the presentation, but it was good. Was interesting at the beginning, but for your presentation I understand well that one of the limitations to the adoption to the organic cotton production is related to their capabilities to change for another crops. At the beginning I did understand, but from your explanation that is more related to the organization and the measures that is taken, or the measure that is not taken to safeguard that these farmers go to another no cotton crops. But from your work, I saw that the main constraints is related to the input utilization and the ability to reach high level of productivity. Instead, you show that in your work that these farmers are having good returns. So at the end, the main constraint is related to the input utilization. So my recommendation is go a little bit deep on the politics recommendation that maybe is important to improve as well, not just to give more equipments, but especially to develop the production of inputs. And because this is favor not just the farmers that work with organic cotton, but especially will create more jobs and local jobs, because those ones that depend of the conventional, they work on conventional production. Their inputs are more or less from foreign from the local, so do not create jobs. But this, so one way to maybe to convince the government to take more measures to develop this kind of organic production is to show that it creates more employees, as if they are working to produce the inputs, the biological, for example, treatment is in local. So is some of the recommendations that I give for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now let's go to the presentation 4 made by Telfa William Abraham. Okay. You have also 15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I'm Telfa Abraham. For me, the challenge has been translating climate ideas to the policy, to the decks of policymakers, and then to get them to commit into action. And while we have a lot of climate change studies have focused on agriculture, adaptations, climate smart agriculture, we noticed a gap in relating climate findings to policymakers in the health sector, especially when it comes to health sector financing and passing it through or linking it through the Sustainable Development Goals number 3. So when I saw the call for this conference and the theme on climate change and health outcomes, it was, for me, it was just an avenue to continue or to present a finding of a study where I was already engaged in. There was this conference called the 5th African Conference on Emerging Infectious Diseases. It's held in Abuja between the 7th to 9th of August 2019. It had a lot of government ministers, players in the health sector, environmental studies all across Africa. And for me, it was a privilege to be there, to be invited actually to present, not just as an individual, but as a WASCAL alumni. Like Professor Limbai said, through the noise we make through our publication, somebody was able to identify me in the policy-making space in my country and give me that hand. So it was, for me, it was a good opportunity. So basically what this study does is to examine existing database that monitor Africa's progress with the SDGs. And while I was in Accra last year for the WASCAL overall alumni conference, there was this person that presented on Sustainable African Monitor, African SDG Monitors. African SDG Monitor. That African SDG Monitor is a database that has index that measures the progress of every African country, including the WASCAL 10+1, that is if Cape Verde finally comes in, that it monitors the 17 SDGs for each of these countries to see how we are progressing every year. So we looked at that data and then to see what it says about health outcomes, attainment of SDGs. And then based on the effect of climate change, rolling back efforts already achieved in development planning. Because one thing each of us agree in our literature review is that in as much as development problems exist already, in as much as there are a lot of challenges poor holder farmers face, in as much as there are challenges that developing and emerging countries face, plus the progress they've made so far with the MDGs or any of their national community-based development plan, climate change has a way of rolling back those little efforts. It has a way of taking back the efforts they've achieved in those sectors. And in the health sector, one area that was achieved, that came out clearly as a gap is that diseases that were already eradicated under the MDGs framework are already reimagined in Africa. You know, like airborne diseases that were long gone, you know, are already reimagined, and it's creating room for concern. And researchers and policymakers are engaging themselves to ask themselves, what is the driver of this factor? Again, there are a vector of factors, but climate change cannot be excluded. So that is what this study does, to see how the data you and I have already, how it plays out in the health sector space, and ultimately to see how much finance we can garner back to the West African sub-region, to existing institutions or to existing institutions like WASCA, to see how much can be done collectively. So I will just go straight. The literature is very clear. Infectious diseases are spread by water, vector, animals, feed, soil, contact, etc. And we know, I think one of my classmates during the WASCA second set here in Dakar, I think Amadou Diko, he made it very clear how vector-borne diseases is also making this, also aggravating the breeders' crisis by scaling up the number of deaths they record in the cattle value chain business. And we have other studies also, like the European Center for Disease Prevention Control since 2010. They argue that the transmission patterns of communicable diseases are influenced by many factors, no doubt, but including climatic and ecological elements. So while we have this pool of literature, empirical evidence for West Africa, any of the WASCA 10, any of the country you and I represent in sub-Saharan Africa, does not exist at the macro level, because for the connection between climate action and health policy moves, the evidence will first of all be macro-based. So we are glad to see studies like European Center for the CDC, Center for Disease Control, already putting forward researches that are regional, continental in outlook. And we're also happy to see institutions like WASCA trying to provide evidence at the regional level. But to get countries to commit into country-specific action, we need to use those data and show to policymakers that this is the trend so that they can be able to commit. So with those in mind, having this strand of literature in mind that there's a link between the reemergence of infectious diseases with climate change, let's have in mind also there are also skeptics who don't think there's any link at all. So as researchers, let's be open to both ends. So what we did, instead of just saying, let's examine existing data on climate change and how it relates with communicable diseases, we also said, okay, let's get the data on non-communicable diseases and see how these interactions take place so that we'll not just be going one-sided, like already determined. So to do that, we used two sets of data. Okay, here we go. We got this study relied on secondary data from the World Development Indicators and the African SDG dashboard. These are secondary data that you can also access and verify and even extend if need be. From the World Development Indicators, I beg your pardon, I was able to get data for the cause of death by non-communicable diseases, then the cause of death by non-communicable diseases. But, and this is where WASCA, our modern institution, and ZEF, by extension, has an extended advantage. The data for drought, flood, extreme temperature in the World Development Indicator is just stacked as a block. You know, drought / flood / extreme temperature as a percentage of population. So one does not even know which data one ends up using. But that is the data that they have, that the WDI has for climate change. So luckily, it also has for CO2 emissions per data point. And again, the availability of data for these variables is not on a regular time series basis. It just exists for 2000, 2010, 2015, 2016 for the spread of communicable and non-communicable diseases. Then for drought, it has just for 2009. So naturally, by all the mathematics you and I know, it becomes clear that to carry out empirical estimation of such studies, we'll be forced to stay on the data point for drought, where they have for flood and drought, and then run back to cross-sectional regression analysis. So we get for all the WASCA countries, data that as much as we can get for cause of death, non-communicable, communicable diseases, and the one for climate change, CO2, even though CO2 has on a regular basis, to account for other data and allow those variables count in our regression, we quickly made use of cross-sectional regression analysis. That's how it was determined. Initially, I started out this research hoping I would do a very nice-looking panel data, introducing dynamic shocks and things like that. But as you explore the data further, you begin to see the constraint. And then for those of us in WASCA and our mother institution, the ZEF, it brings back to mind the need for the WASCA data. I think there's a WASCA data something, I think WADI. The need for studies, new studies especially, to begin to see how to gather, I beg your pardon, secondary data in areas like this. Then for the African dashboard, like I said, that African SDG dashboard monitors all the 17 SDGs for African countries. So since we have for 2018, what we did is to quickly see, as a cross-section, as a region, the 10 WASCA countries, using the SDG that is for health, how does it correlate with other SDGs and monitors the progress? So basically, as much data that I had, we employed trend analysis and cross-sectional regression analysis. So with all that, I think I'll be fast from here now. So this is a finding from my PhD thesis here in Dakar under the WASCA Climate Change Economics, funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education, now Ministry of Education and Research. Okay, so I was able to publish that one of my supervisors, and you can see from figure 1 here, you see clearly that how would you rate overall impact of climate change in your community? This community is for an aspect of the Sahel northern region of Nigeria, precisely for Kebbi State, a community in Kebbi State, another community in Niger State. And I think for the paper that a colleague presented here, you could see it from that person's paper that Kebbi the sample size, the areas we chose to survey is consistent even with people researching today. So clearly, people rate the impact of climate change in the community to be very high. So then this figure also comes from that paper there, myself and William Fonta. You see, in what ways is your community affected by the impact of climate change? And you can see by high temperature, 5 minutes, high temperature, prolonged drought, and flash floods and things like that. So through these channels, we see that undoubtedly climate change is a concern for communities in the WASCA countries being studied. So this is the database we have. Cause of death by non-communicable disease. I think this data point will be boring to your eyes. So let me just take us straight to the trend. You see, for sub-Saharan Africa as a region, cause of death by non-communicable diseases is increasing. You see, that's the blue part. You see, it moved from 2000 to 2010 to 2015 to 2016. While the cause of death by non-communicable diseases that decreased from 2000 to 2010, then up to 2015, where the MDGs ended, the decline between 2015 to 2016 has become very slow. There's almost no significant difference between the bar you see for sub-Saharan Africa for 2015 and 2016. And the whole of that trend can be observed even for Nigeria, Senegal, and Dakar. You see that the effort they achieved from the 2000 to 2010 in reducing death from communicable diseases, that effort has slowed down in recent times, especially in 2015 and 2016. More concern or more worry is the fact that this is the threshold date for the SDGs. So we begin to check to see what role climate change has to do with all this. So this is, okay, now then for the whole of I pulled the 10 West African countries together. You see how the graph looks like for communicable, this for non-communicable diseases. You see the blue, non-communicable is going up. So all of our colleagues researching in natural disasters, researching in climate change and conflict, and all of those variables, you can see that death from non-communicable disease is going up. And all the factors that we can investigate have to be considered on the table, not excluding climate change. But of concern for the health practitioners is why it is becoming difficult to scale up the rate at which the spread of emerging diseases or communicable diseases has stayed in recent times. So I promise you I'll run up in 2 minutes. So this is just the CO2 trend. I'm sure we're all familiar with this with the literature. It just shows CO2 going up by different countries, by WASCA countries, by selected African countries, for Nigeria, Senegal. The trend is the same. That's all we just did with this. Then for this data is from the World Development Indicator. It isn't mine, but it's a reliable data source. I'm sure you would agree. You see that for drought, flood, extreme temperatures, taken as a stark data point, you see that Niger has cause for worry in terms of how climate change is spreading through drought, flood, and extreme temperature. Then Nigeria is a big player in the CO2 emission part. So Niger on this side, Nigeria on the other side. Bottom line, these two countries are WASCA 2. They are part of the WASCA countries. And if these issues remain in these countries, then considering already the issues of drought, food crisis, then climate change spreading through these channels, then you will no longer be surprised to hear new diseases emerging in oil-producing areas like in River State, in Bayelsa State, where black soot, and airborne diseases are re-emerging, and in Niger, where it is now going from food crisis to malnutrition to increase in infant mortality and things like that. This is the kind of pass-through one is looking for. Okay, this is the SDG 3. So what we did here, I'm so sorry. Country rating with progress for the SDG 13, which is climate specific. This is how it goes. Look at Niger. Niger is doing the list for climate change 13, which is the climate change action. This is for 2018 only. The data may change as the release for 2019 and things like that. So put a caveat on that. Then you see for the West African countries, look at how their health indices are performing, maternal mortality. You can see that Nigeria has one of the highest maternal mortality. So remember, Niger is doing worse off in SDG 13. Nigeria is doing bad in health indices. Then don't forget that data I showed you, where Niger and Nigeria were the big players on the negative part. Now, I now correlated SDG 3, which is the health outcome, with other SDGs just for 2018. And you see there's a strong correlation between the health SDG with clean water and sanitation, affordable energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure, clean cities and communities, and climate action. And if you remember one of the presentations that we got from Professor Von Braun, I think yesterday, he made it clear that for climate policy concerns, we cannot rule out issues of adaptation, cost of adaptation, mitigation, cost of mitigation, and finding that that equilibrium to be able to blend these things together to find a tolerable path for it. So this is how much it goes. It tells us that health outcomes matter even for the attainment of climate action. So here what we did is just very straightforward cross-sectional regression analysis. And the summary of all the finding is that there's a significant relationship between the variance of climate change we use in this case and their effect on the spread of communicable and non-communicable diseases. So in conclusion, bottom line, this paper just seeks to present evidence that will stir up further need for action by policymakers to commit to coordinated action at the global, regional, and country level towards supporting existing effort aimed at tackling emerging infectious diseases in sub-Saharan Africa, WASCA inclusive, and more so, increased funding is needed to keep communities safe from the health risks associated with extreme temperatures, as well as to support the livelihood. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I'm so sorry for the time. I couldn't.
Okay. So, Doctor, you have only 3 minutes to make your comment.
So, my congrats to you, William Abraham, for highlight this issue. Instead, we are speaking about food, majority about food security, but yes, it's important we take in account the effects of the climate change on the health. And yes, is I cannot tell it's a neglected issue, but we didn't put until the moment enough effort to understand how the climate is affecting the health in our communities, because of course, how you pointed out, this the intensifying of this climate events like drugs, like you didn't mention, but the dust maybe is experience dust. The intensity of the dust, and maybe not just the intensity, but the frequency of the dust is something that we are experiencing, especially in our region in Cape Verde, and this is possible that this can trigger some health issues. There's not exactly any studies about, but there are some evidence. Are people that are questioning, for example, some years ago in Cape Verde, around 4 or 5 years ago, we had in my island, but a huge concern about the problems with ice. I do not remember the name in English. I'm Portuguese speaker, some words make me. But for example, in one day you have more than 5,000 people going to do the hospital. Our population is just 80. Your effort to put to this was more about open questions, not exactly to give answer, but yes, it was important you go in this way. So for the moment is that okay?
Okay, thanks so much. And now let's go to the general discussion. And I want to know if somebody have a question, any comment? Prof?
No one else.
Just so.
Is there no one else? I want to comment on the last two presentations. And Tafa Abraham, the research on climate change and health is rich. I think you need to frame your paper with a conceptual framework. The academic literature on climate change and health has grown rapidly over the last 5 years. It seems you have not tapped into that. It's easy to search. So I was missing a coherent conceptual framework from you, and causality was not established of the relationships between climate change and health. I could point to a number of big conference and scientific articles in the economics literature, in the climate literature, and in the health literature, for instance, in the Lancet journal. We had a big conference in the Vatican Academy 2 years ago. It's all on the web. I think you need to enrich your work and frame it well before jumping into some correlations. We are here to help. The topic is rather new, last 5 years or so, most of the articles and books, but it is far beyond what you have presented. My second comment goes to Abdoulaye Koudougou. I'm equally critical with you in order to keep it balanced, as I was with Terfa Abraham. As far as I know, the cotton business in Burkina Faso is dominated by the ginning industry. They provide the inputs, and they thereby give credits, and the farmers have to deliver the cotton, and that's how they get screwed up and ripped off. And that's the ginning industry has a key role in your story, and I didn't hear about it. If the ginning industry, as the literature says, is providing substandard inputs and then charges the farmers a high price by not paying them well for their cotton, it's not a farmer's adoption, non-adoption problem, but it's a much bigger problem of the agriculture industry. A number of countries have this problem. So comparing organic with what you called conventional does not make a lot of sense when the so-called conventional was a failed GMO experiment, which the Burkina ginning industry screwed up. You have a missing variable or a missing conceptual framing issue there. So those are my two comments. Don't jump to regressions, don't jump to comparisons, especially of static data. Do your narrative right, your narrative on your story, which must include all actors on such a big issue as organic, non-organic, or GMO, non-GMO. In your case, the introduction sounded to me rather ideological. I think we are far beyond that. Organic makes a lot of sense. Non-organic may make a lot of sense. You're an economist, so let the NGOs talk about this or that. Be a tough economist.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Any comment before giving the floor to the presenters? Any comments? Okay. Do you want to say something about Abulai Kudugu? No. Tefa William, do you want to say something about the comment? No. Musa Diallo, what about you? No?